So the entry order, he wants it to follow the 20 EMA. Basically, just trail the EMA20, whether it's going up or down. And so this would be a limit order there. And he wants it to be 2 contracts. So one of the contracts will have a profit target of 20 ticks there. And so we can see that the second contract isn't listed. So that must just be a runner. So we're going to assume that the second contract is a runner. And then the initial stop loss is going to be 20 ticks. And then it will trail. Well, actually, it says trail the second contract. So I guess only the second contract will have will be the trailing stop loss. And well, I guess it would be 10 ticks below or above the 20 EMA. So reverse these. So it would be below for a long, right? Below the 20 EMA for a long trade or above it for a short trade. All right, there's our moving average. All right, next step, let's get BlackBird on the chart. So we're going to go into our strategies window here and go into the shark indicators folder. And there's BlackBird and there's Raven. So let's put BlackBird on here. You actually have to consciously enable your strategy. So that way you don't have something auto trading by accident, right? A good little safeguard there that NinjaTrader is requiring for strategies. All right, well, let's get BlackBird open here. And let's bring up the question again. All right, so, you always start with the entry order when you're building an order set. So we know it's going to be a limit order, and we want to follow the 20 EMA. All right, so let's start with a limit entry order, and next we'll open it up, and we're going to adjust the initial placement here. And instead of the mode being price, we want it to be an indicator value, so we can select the 20 EMA. So we'll switch over to indicator value, and then the indicator right here, there we go. That is where we will plug in the EMA. All right, there's our EMA 20 period, and call it good. And let's see here. So if you wanted an offset from the EMA, so maybe you wanted to kind of front run the EMA just in case, right? We could put it 1 tick above the EMA for a long trade, right? So that would front run the EMA. And of course, for a short trade, that would be a negative 1 tick. So if you wanted to, you could add a tick or 2 offset, but we'll just leave it at 0 like that. And so that is the initial placement. And so now if we want our entry to follow the indicator, then we need to switch over to the trailing actions tab here. And let's set the mode to custom so we can create ourselves a custom trailing rule. And so now let's add our trailing rule here. And let's give this a name. All right, so we'll follow the EMA20. So for entry orders, you almost never use a trigger. Yeah, almost never use a trigger with entry orders. I can't even think off the top of my head any situation where I've used a trigger for an entry order. But I can imagine that every once in a great while you might need to use the triggers for an entry order, but typically, most people are just having their entries just follow some kind of moving average, and you just want that to occur immediately. So that means there's just no trigger. So just think of triggers as typically you will use a trigger when you need to wait for something else to happen, right? So if you need to delay the trailing from happening, or you need the trailing to wait for some kind of condition, that is basically what triggers are there for. That's what this trigger on column is for, right? And so with entry orders, You know, like I said, I can't really think of any reason why you would want your entry order to pause or wait to start following an indicator. So that's why this is never used here. So we're just going to jump straight into the actions, and we want to move the order to, so instead of the last price, right, we don't want to move our entry to the last price. We want to move it to an indicator value. So basically we're just going to set this menu up exactly the same as we did on the options tab for the initial placement. Right? So let's go into the indicators and replace that with the EMA. And there's the EMA. And again, make sure it's a 20 period, like so. And again, if you are using an offset, you know, make sure that you remember to set your offset in this menu as well if you want an offset to front run. So, all right, so there's our EMA plugged in, you know, for the trailing actions there. And then the repeat, you know, if you want to follow the EMA up, you know, so say like there was a long run and you want your entry order to keep following the moving average, then you need this trailing rule to keep repeating, you know, indefinitely until the order gets picked up. And since the order is following a moving average, you can only repeat once per bar, right? Indicators will only update themselves once per bar when the bar closes, basically. So, all right. Okay, so there we go. So we have it there. And, all right, so we had set the initial placement to the EMA 20, and yeah, EMA 20, and then we have a trailing roll. So there we go. There's our entry order, all done, squared away. So now we can jump down to the profit target. So that's just going to be a simple 20 tick profit target for the first contract. So let's go to profit targets, and let's just pick the 10 tick one from our quick list, and then open it up and go over to the options tab. And so the initial placement for our profit target, we're going to open that up. And so for the offset, we're just going to increase this to 20 ticks for the offset, right? So profit targets are almost always taking the entry price, right, and then just adding an offset to an offset away from the entry price. Right? So that's that. All right, profit target's done. So now the stop loss. All right, so our stop loss is going to be the initial. So it's going to start off as a 20 tick stop loss. So let's just pick, let's see here. Yeah, I'm just thinking if the trailing has something that we can use, but let's see. No, this is not. Yeah, so the stop loss is going to follow the EMA20. So there's nothing here on this quick list. So we'll just use the 10 tick fixed and then add our customized trailing afterwards. So, all right, so let's open up the order. And so the initial placement, let's adjust that so it's a 20 tick. All right, so there we go. So that's a negative number for a long trade. So there's the initial placement of 20 ticks. And then let's go into the trailing actions. And we'll create a custom trailing roll here. And let's add that. All right, so all right, so we're going to trail the EMA20 minus 10 ticks. And yeah, there's no conditions here for the trailing. So that means that there's no trigger, so we're not going to delay the trailing for any reasons. We're just going to jump into the trailing right away. So the action here is, so the action, we're going to move the order, our stop loss, to a indicator value. And so there's the EMA20 for us. And we want a 10 tick offset from the EMA20. There we go. So for a long trade, right, it'll be 10 ticks below the EMA20, like so. All right, that's done, simple enough. And then again, for this stop loss trailing, we want this to repeat indefinitely, and it's going to update every once per bar when the moving average is recalculated, right, once per bar. And that'll do it. And now let's create our second contract here, right? Because we're going to submit 2 contracts. So for the second one here, let's do copy from A. And so for the second one, right, it doesn't look like there's a profit target. It's just going to be a runner. So we'll delete our profit target. And there we go. So our entry order, right, as we can see on the trailing actions tab, that this entry order is going to follow the EMA20, so it already has all the trailing rules copied over for us. And the same thing for the stop loss, right? The stop loss has our trailing rules copied over to it already as well. So, and that should do it. So David's asking, yeah, so if you wanted to trail by any indicator, you would do the same process. Exactly. Yep, exactly. So when you want to use indicators, right, so if it's in the initial placement, if you wanted to use an indicator for the initial placement, you just take your mode and change it from price to indicator value. All right. So, yeah. So just remember down here, this indicator down here, remember it's in the offset section, right? So this indicator is used for calculating an offset from the price that's selected up here, right? So if you're wanting to follow a moving average, well, a moving average actually is not an offset. A moving average is the actual price or the actual location for your order. So it's not an offset, it's the actual location. So that means you set the actual price or location up at the top, and the offset section is literally, as it says, it's to calculate an offset from the price that's calculated up here in the main part of the menu, right? Yeah. So for having your stop losses follow or trail some kind of indicator, yep, it's the same process. You just go into your action, the move to, and for this menu, make sure that the select mode is set to indicator value, and that is where you select your moving average, right? All right, yeah, so David would like to add another trailing rule that's going to tighten up the stop loss. Yeah, so say like after 30 ticks of profit, you want to tighten that stop loss to just trail by 10 ticks. All right, sure, yeah. So to do that, now, yeah, so you have to ask yourself, is the first order set, is it possible for the first order set to tighten up its stop loss? And so if you're waiting for 30 ticks of profit, then obviously the answer is no, because your profit target of 20 ticks is going to be hit before you get to 30 ticks of profit. So that means we only need to add that stop loss trailing rule to the second order set here, right? So if you wanted to add that, we're going to add another trailing rule here, and then we'll do something like at 30 ticks of profit, then yeah, we're going to trail by 10 ticks. There. All right. So the key here is that we're waiting for 30 ticks of profit before using this 10 tick trailing rule here. So now we actually need to use a trigger here. So the trigger is we can either use profit or loss, or we can use the delay. and the delay is just a little easier to set up, but they kind of have cross functionality. So for the delay, we can use the ticks of movement, right? So basically, when the market moves in a profitable direction, and then we can put 30 ticks in there, right? So that is basically our trigger condition. Is we're delaying this trailing rule and waiting for 30 ticks of profit, right? And then that is when we will trail by 10 ticks. So if you're trailing by 10 ticks behind the price, then you are using the last price and just creating an offset from the last price of 10 ticks, right? So, and of course, since this is a stop loss trailing rule, it's going to be the best last price, the most profitable last price, right? So basically, as the last price goes up and down, your stop loss is not going to go up and down. BlackBird's smart enough to know that stop losses only go in one direction, right? Stop losses should only be moving in the direction of the trade. Stop losses don't go backwards, right? That kind of defeats the whole purpose of a stop loss if a stop loss goes backwards. So when you're offsetting from the last price, it's going to be basically the best last price. So, and let's see. Last thing to do is set the repeat here. So we're going to repeat indefinitely. And in this particular case, right, since this is just a straight out flat 10 tick profit target, then you probably want your stop loss to update every single tick of profit. So we're going to adjust the repeat every. There you go, ticks of movement. So for every one tick of movement that that price makes, this rule will evaluate itself and possibly move the stop loss. Obviously if price keeps moving in the right direction. So that is how you would add a tightening rule of such. And so if you want to add multiple tightening rules, the key is to figure out the trigger condition, and basically to kind of figure out the delay so the delay is where you determine how much profit you're waiting for before you tighten the stop loss again, right? So that, so if you have multiple trailing conditions where you're going 10 ticks of trailing to 5 ticks of trailing, to whatever, the trigger condition is where you determine, at how much profit you want that trailing rule to kick in. So, all right. So we have that. So let me see what else we got here. And so, okay, so Davis is saying, so then you would use the trigger on. Correct. Yep, you got it, David. So, all right. Well, I think we have our order set complete now. So let's take it for a little test drive. So we'll click OK there. And let's see. Well, I left the trend in quite the downtrend here. So I guess I should place a short order. So of course, keep in mind that one of the pitfalls of using indicators, for placing your orders is you can only trade, usually you can only trade in one direction, right? So in this case, since the EMA is above price, I can only place a sell order, right? If I placed a long order, obviously that would get filled immediately. So there, let's actually do that so you can see what's going to happen here. There. So let's close that out. So if I go long, right, obviously that's just going to get filled immediately. But then there's a bigger problem here where the stop loss, is on the wrong side of the market. So the trailing roll for the stop loss, boom, just gets hit instantly here. So yeah, all right, let's close that all out. And let's see. Yeah, I guess, we'll go into, after I've tested this, we'll discuss some things that we can do to kind of mitigate some of these issues here, of using an indicator for your order here. But first, let's just test this out as it is. So let me smooth the market up here. There. All right, so we're just going to wait for a little bit while the market moves up and fills that entry order. There. All right, so this happened really fast, but you guys might have been able to see that, right? The stop loss, it started up here, right, as our 20 tick stop loss, and then immediately, all right, what's going on here? Right, so our stop loss started up here, and then immediately jumped down to here because of the trailing roll, right? So our stop loss started up here at 20 ticks and then immediately jumped down to the 10 tick offset from the EMA20, right? So we can, we can discuss some common things that customers have done to kind of to deal with that. All right, anyways, so yeah, just a little comment on that. But so let me pull the market down and we'll get our EMA to move down again, and we'll just basically watch the trailing roll follow the EMA down and just make sure everything's working as expected. All right, there we go. So we can see our stop losses trailing down. And there we go. One of the contracts is closed out. So we just have one stop loss remaining. And let's see here. All right, so we're waiting for 30 ticks of profit. So we're almost there, right? There we go. And bingo. Now we can see our stop loss is now just doing the 10 tick trailing right now. So it tightened up quite a bit, and there we go. All right, so I'll just neutralize the trend, and we'll talk about a few ways that we can mitigate the issue of placing your order on an indicator, such as a moving average. Right, so the first issue that comes up is the entry order. Since it's a limit, right? You can only trade in the direction of the side that the price is on the moving average. So if price is below the moving average, well, you can only take short trades if you wanted to place a limit entry order, right? So, but what if price is below your moving average, but you wanted to go long, right? Well, we have this option here of enable automatic order type selection. So this option, as you can see, the type here has changed. It now says stop/limit, right? So if I uncheck this, it went back to a stop. We actually wanted it a limit. Right, but if I check it, then the options change for us. So basically, BlackBird will automatically determine whether your entry order should be a stop or a limit. Right. So for example, again, going back to the chart, if price is below the moving average and you wanted to go long, then BlackBird will be able to determine that Well, your entry order needs to be a stop entry order in order to place it above price, right? So there you go. So you can let BlackBird kind of automatically determine whether your entry should be a stop or limit, and so this option here, enable automatic order type selection. This option was specifically created for use with indicators. Obvious that indicators, create this kind of inherent problem. So, all right, so there's one solution for the entry order. And so we need to go into the other entry order and enable that over there as well. So now both of these entry orders, as we can see, the name there says auto select. So that's one thing. That's one issue there that can address the entry order and using an indicator. And then the second one, is going to be the stop loss. So again, if we're trying to go long below the moving average, well, we wouldn't want the stop loss to move above the market, right? Because that's just going to close your trade out immediately. So we can go into the stop loss and go into the trailing actions. And here so basically we just kind of back figured that, if we do, trade in the wrong direction against, some moving average, we need our stop loss to wait for price to move onto the correct side of our moving average before our stop loss moves to, or before our stop loss starts trailing that moving average, right? So with the trigger, what we can do is we can compare price to an indicator. And so we can make sure that price is on the correct side of the indicator before this trailing rule is allowed to kick in and start executing, right? So we can check to make sure that the close of the bar is, and so for the indicator, we can put in our EMA20 here. All right, there's our EMA20. And so for a long trade, we want to make sure that the closing price of the bar is not equal, but probably we want the close of the bar to be above the indicator, right? So you want A above B, right? So in other words, the closing price above the EMA. And we could also do, as a safeguard, we could say, well, let's wait for the closing price. We could take the closing price and, subtract 10 ticks, or actually, I kind of like to think of it the opposite way. I like to take the moving average and say add 10 ticks, something like that. So we could say, well, let's wait for the closing price to be above the EMA plus 10 ticks. So we'll take the EMA, add 10 ticks, and then the closing price has to be above that before we want our stop loss to start following that EMA20. And then for a short, that's just going to be the opposite, right? A below B. Right. So basically, this puts in a monitoring condition. So BlackBird will make sure that the close of the bar, is above the EMA20 by at least 10 ticks or more. And then this trailing row, and once this condition happens, then the stop loss can start trailing the EMA20 minus 10 ticks, right? Yeah. So there's some an extra check that you can put in to make sure that your stop loss isn't going to close out your trade right away. So, all right. Yeah, so now that we have this extra, condition in here, this extra check before the trailing happens. We then also need to add it to this stop loss here as well. So the trail EMA 10 ticks. So we will go in here and add that price versus indicator into this one as well. So input A was the closing price of the bar. Input B, that was our EMA. Let's plug that back in there. There's our EMA 20 period. And this is where we added 10 ticks to the EMA. And then the long mode was A above B, and the short was A below B. And there we go. All right, so now we added that requirement, that verification that price is on the correct side of our moving average before the trailing rules can kick in. So, all right, so let's click OK. And so, looking at where we are now, so now if I go long, right, price is below the moving average. So if I go long now, right, BlackBird placed a stop entry. So this is a stop entry sitting up there. And, if we wanted to verify that, we can go to orders. And yeah, so we can see that our two buy orders are stop market entry orders there. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then let's see. Yeah, I'll move the market up here. Let's move the market up to get these filled, and then we'll watch the stop loss. All right, there we go. And so our stop losses should just kind of hang out down here for quite a while until price gets at least 10 ticks above our moving average, right? That was our trigger on conditions there. And all right, let's move this up a little faster. All right, almost there. So remember, we got to get 10 ticks up. So the bar has to close. The bar needs to close 10 ticks above the moving average. And so that hasn't quite happened yet. There we go. Okay, now our stop loss has started to trail the EMA there. Yeah, so there we go. All right, and now once we get to 30 ticks of profit, then our stop loss jumps up to that 10 tick, kind of that flat, basic 10 tick fixed trailing roll there. So, all right. So there we have it, David. Let's see here. All right, so a couple of tips that we learned here. So for the entry order, right? Since we want the entry order to basically follow a moving average, we used the automatic order type selection there to make sure that we can place a trade, regardless of what side the indicator the market's on. And then the other tip was for the stop loss that, yeah, if you want your stop loss to follow a moving average, and this kind of, I guess, is a good tip when for using any kind of indicator for your stop loss, which is to basically use the price versus indicator to make sure that the market, right, the close of the bar, is on the correct side of whatever indicator you're wanting your stop loss to follow, right? Do that check first, and then you can have the trailing roll kick in after that. So David's asking, so this is to be used in the way I wanted it to. I can't answer that for sure, David, because you didn't explain exactly how you want to use it, but I think so. So he's saying, so we can use it both ways. Okay. Yeah. So I think I understand your question now. Yeah. So with these adjustments here, you can now place a long or a short trade regardless of which side of the EMA the market is on. So yeah, so these adjustments allow you to place a trade in any direction, and the order types will basically automatically adjust as necessary. Yeah, so again, right, the entry order will automatically adjust to whether it needs to be a stop entry or a limit entry, depending on what direction you want to trade, and of course depending on what side of the moving average your order is on. So and then for the trailing rule, the trailing rule will make sure that the stop loss doesn't begin too soon. Yeah, and actually maybe after doing this little test here, I remember that it looked like price had to get really far from the EMA, maybe much further than necessary, before the stop losses started following that EMA. So we'll just go in here, and instead of making it a 10 tick offset from the EMA, maybe a 5 tick might be a little better. Of course, this is subjective. You'll just kind of have to do some testing to see on that. But again, this trigger on condition, this is only necessary when you're trading the wrong direction, when not trading the wrong direction, but when price is on the wrong side of the EMA, right? That's what this trigger condition is for, is if price is on the wrong side of the EMA, that's exactly what this condition is for, is to mitigate that problem. So, all right, so let's just go in here, and we'll take both of these price versus indicator conditions and just make this a 5 tick offset from the EMA there. All right, something like that. And let's save this. We'll save this out here. All right, so one of our profit targets is a 20 tick, and our stop loss starts off at 20 ticks, and then it starts to trail the EMA20 minus 10 ticks. We'll save that out. Oh, yeah. There was something else. Something else I was going to point out here as well. Let's see. All right, let's close this out. And let's see. All right, let me place a long. And so I just need to get this order filled here. So something I wanted to point out about the trailing stop losses. So this is kind of another common, condition that most people have with their stop losses when they're following a moving average. And I'll show you guys that in just a moment. All right, so when this entry gets filled, right, the stop is going to start at 20 ticks and then immediately move to a 10 tick. Oh, actually, no, it's not anymore. Oh, that's right. That's right. So you notice actually my stop loss is kind of hanging out as a 20 tick offset, right? So the initial placement of being this initial stop loss of 20 ticks is going to stay there until the bar closes 5 ticks away from the EMA. So there we go. So now that we have this distance between the close of the bar and the EMA, then the stop loss will start following or trailing the EMA. So actually yeah, this other thing I was going to point out was basically solved by that other problem. So, but what I was going to point out is that, you know, a lot of people will want their stop loss to remain as, you know, as that initial 20 ticks, and they want the trailing to wait for X amount of profit. You know, so for example, right, so if we have, yeah, let's open this up here, right? So let's say, right, your first profit target is 20 ticks. So, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, let's have the stop loss wait until either the first profit target gets filled and then kick in the trailing, right? Then we'll have the stop loss trail once the first profit target kicks in, or, you know, just wait until maybe the market makes 10 ticks of profit and then the stop loss can start trailing and kicking in, right? And so if you wanted to do that, if you wanted, wanted to add that as a requirement as well, then that would be another trigger condition. So what we could do is go to the Advanced tab, because now we have two conditions to look for. So yeah, so like if you wanted the trailing to wait for there to be at least 10 ticks of profit, then we would actually have two trigger conditions. So we would have a delay, and so our delay would be wait for 10 ticks of profit, and then you can kick in the trailing. And then also we have this other condition here, waiting for the closing price of the bar to be at least 5 ticks, you know, away from that EMA as well. So, and then the mode would be any, I believe. Yeah. So whichever one of these conditions occurs first, then that's when the trailing rule would be allowed to kick in and start executing. Yeah, so that was the other thing here I just wanted to mention is usually a lot of people want their trailing to wait for there to be at least X number of ticks of profit, and then the trailing rule can kick in. So, all right. Anyways, I'll just, I'll remove that and just leave it on the basic tab here. All right. So the basic tab, just to recap this, the basic tab allows you to use one condition, one trigger condition. So you can only use one of these trigger conditions. If you need to use multiple triggering conditions, that's when you use the Advanced tab. So the Advanced tab allows you to add multiple trigger conditions here. All right, but we'll leave it on that for now. All right, yeah, so David is asking, is there a way to close the trade if price, closes above or below the EMA? Yes, right, yeah, you could use this same price versus indicator trigger condition to check whether the bar closes, on the, I guess you could say the opposite side or the wrong side of the moving average, and then close out the trade if you wanted to. Yeah, so to do that, let's add a trailing rule. So let's see here, what should we call this? I'm not coming up with a good name here, but so yeah, so basically what you have here, David, is a kind of a flattened trailing rule here. So we will use the price versus indicator, and so again, input B, that's going to be your EMA20. All right, so we're just going to compare the close of the bar to the EMA20. And so if you're in a long trade, then if the close goes below the EMA, I think that's the condition you're looking for. If the closing price goes below the EMA for a long trade, and then for a short, it would just be the reverse. Now keep in mind that this trailing roll or this price versus indicator, does conflict with the other one. And then so the action here is you want to close the trade out. So under type, that's going to be flattened position. So we'll change that to flattened position there. All right. And if you're going to flatten a position, then obviously there's no repeat, right? You can't flatten a position more than once, so there's no repeat for this. So there we go. Yeah, and so these two triggers actually conflict with each other. Yeah, so we'd have to remove one of them. But since it sounds like you're not gonna trade against the EMA, so all the adjustments I put in there probably just would need to be undone, removed. So yeah, we can do that. So all right, so yeah, let's remove all that. So here, let's all right, so we're going to put the trigger back to none. Actually, here, I'm going to take a little shortcut here. So I'm just going to delete order set B, and we'll just adjust everything on order set A here. All right, so let's remove the automatic order type, and we'll just put it back to limit there. And limit, and let me just double check the trailing for the entry order, and yeah, all right, that's good. And all right, so let's just double check the stop loss. All right, so 20 ticks, and then trail the EMA. Yeah, so there's no trigger in there anymore. All right, we have the flatten, trailing rule there is now in place. All right, yeah, that looks all good. All right, so now that I have the entry order, put back to its original, and the stop loss, now I will make a copy of A and just remove that profit target, and yeah, we should be good. That should do it. And let's test this out. Let's see. All right, so we have to go short now. So let's go short. We'll get this filled. All right, there's our stop loss trailing down. All right, so that's working. And let me move the trend up here. So now what I'm going to do is just close the bar right on the other side of the EMA, and we'll see that the trade just gets flattened out. And there we go. All right. So there we go. Price, the bar closed on the wrong side of the EMA, and the position was closed out. So cool. David's asking, with BlackBird, is that a bloodhound function? No, nothing I've shown you here is a bloodhound function. Nothing is a bloodhound function. This is all built into BlackBird.